Chapter 1. The Summoning. The lab was silent, save for the hum of the experimental device. Gavin Holt, a scientist long disillusioned by humanity's endless cycle of greed and destruction, stared at the flickering screen in front of him. His once pristine workspace was a cluttered mess of broken equipment, hastily scribbled notes, and half-eaten food rations. Earth was no longer the shining beacon it once claimed to be. Environmental collapse, decades of resource wars, and unchecked corruption had left the planet on the brink of ruin. Gavin adjusted his glasses and exhaled deeply. "All right, one last test," he muttered, glancing at the device he'd spent years perfecting. A quantum resonance communicator. It wasn't designed to send a message to nearby planets. It was meant to contact beings across the galaxy, entities humanity had only speculated about. If this worked, it wouldn't just be a scientific breakthrough, it could mean salvation. Or, as Gavin often feared in his darker moments, humanity's final mistake. He input the final sequence and stepped back as the machine hummed to life. Its central core, a sphere made of an alien alloy scavenged from a crashed vessel years ago, began to glow with an otherworldly light. Patterns of energy danced across its surface, and the surrounding air grew heavy, charged with a static-like sensation. "Please work," Gavin whispered, his voice barely audible. The machine pulsed, releasing waves of light that filled the room. For a moment, everything was still. Then, the glow intensified, and a sharp crack echoed through the lab, followed by a gust of wind that sent papers flying. In the heart of the light, a figure began to form, a silhouette, tall and commanding. The energy condensed, and the light dissipated, leaving a lone figure standing in the middle of the lab. Gavin blinked, his breath catching in his throat. Before him stood an alien woman, unlike anything he had ever imagined. She was tall, towering over him by at least a foot, with an athletic, almost feline grace. Her skin was a deep, shimmering indigo, marked with faint, glowing patterns that pulsed like constellations. Her eyes, slitted like a predator's, burned with a golden light, and her hair, if it could be called that, flowed like liquid silver, rippling despite the still air. She wore a suit of intricately designed armor, its surface etched with symbols that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles. The alien woman fixed her piercing gaze on Gavin and spoke, her voice resonating with an authority that seemed to vibrate the air itself. "You called me, human." Gavin's mouth opened, but no words came out. He took a shaky step back, his mind racing. This wasn't what he expected. He thought he'd reach a distant star system, maybe establish communication with another civilization. He hadn't expected this. The alien tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "Are you mute? Or are all humans this inept?" That snapped Gavin out of his stupor. Wait, he stammered, raising his hands. "You understand me?" Her golden eyes narrowed. "Of course. Your language is rudimentary but sufficient." She crossed her arms, the movement fluid yet deliberate. "Now, explain yourself. Why have you summoned me?" Gavin glanced at the machine, then back at her. "Summoned? I didn't mean to summon anyone. I was trying to send a message, to make contact dash." "You succeeded," she interrupted, her tone clipped. "I am here. Now speak your purpose, or I shall return to my own affairs." Wait, Gavin said, panic rising in his chest. "I need your help. Humanity needs your help." The alien arched an eyebrow. "Help? With what, exactly?" Gavin hesitated, struggling to find the right words. "Earth, my people. We're in trouble. We're running out of resources. Our planet is dying and dash." "Stop," she said, holding up a hand. "Do not waste my time with excuses. Tell me plainly, why should I care?" The question hit Gavin like a slap. He'd spent years preparing for this moment, imagining how he would appeal to an advanced civilization's sense of empathy or morality. But now, faced with this imposing figure, he realized how naive he'd been. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice quiet. "But if we don't get help, we won't survive." The alien studied him for a long moment, her expression inscrutable. Finally, she sighed, a sound that seemed more exasperated than sympathetic. "You humans are as desperate as the stories say." Gavin blinked. "You've heard of us?" Her golden eyes gleamed. Enough to know your kind has little regard for balance or restraint. She took a step closer, towering over him. But you've summoned me nonetheless. That means I am bound by the oath of my ancestors to answer. Oath? Gavin repeated, confused. The alien woman straightened, her posture regal. I am Kalira, warrior of the Zorinthian Order. Long ago, my people made a pact with the ancient races of the galaxy. When called upon by a world in need, we are compelled to respond. You have invoked that pact, human. Gavin's heart raced. So, you'll help us? Kalira's expression darkened. Perhaps. But understand this. I am not here to solve your problems for you. If I am to assist, you must prove that your species is worth saving. Gavin swallowed hard. How do I do that? Kalira's lips curled into a faint smirk, revealing sharp, gleaming teeth. That remains to be seen. The test begins. Kalira moved through Gavin's lab with a predatory grace, her eyes scanning every detail. Despite her dismissive attitude, Gavin could sense her curiosity. She paused by the quantum communicator, her fingers brushing its glowing core. This technology is primitive, she said, her tone neutral, but it is intriguing. How did you come by it? Gavin hesitated. Some of the materials were scavenged from a crashed alien ship. The rest is my own design. Kalira turned to him, her golden eyes narrowing. You tampered with technology beyond your understanding. Typical. I didn't have a choice. Gavin snapped, surprising himself with the force of his words. We're running out of time. I had to try something. Kalira studied him for a moment, then nodded. Desperation drives innovation. That, at least, is commendable. Gavin exhaled, his shoulders sagging. So, what now? Kalira tilted her head, her expression thoughtful. Now, I assess your world. If humanity wishes to earn my aid, it must prove its worth. And if we don't? Gavin asked, dreading the answer. Kalira's gaze hardened. Then I leave. And when the stars reclaim this planet, it will be by your own doing. Chapter 2. Proving Humanity's Worth. The sun hung low over a desolate skyline as Gavin led Kalira out of his lab and into the ruins of what had once been a thriving city. Skyscrapers leaned precariously, their once glimmering windows cracked and shattered. Roads were overgrown with resilient weeds, and the distant sound of scavengers echoed faintly. This is what's left of Earth's greatest achievements, Gavin said, his voice heavy with resignation. Centuries of progress, reduced to this. Kalira followed silently, her piercing gaze sweeping over the ruins. Despite her intimidating presence, she moved with a strange reverence, as though walking through the remains of a battlefield. What happened here? She asked, breaking the silence. Greed, mostly, Gavin replied. We built and consumed without thinking about the consequences. By the time we realized what we'd done, it was too late. The wars over resources didn't help. Kalira's expression hardened. Your species is not unique in its self-destruction. You've seen this before? Gavin asked, glancing at her. Kalira nodded, her glowing eyes distant. The Zorinthians were once much like your people. We ravaged our own world, consumed its resources, and fought over what little remained. When we stood at the edge of extinction, we were forced to change or perish. Gavin hesitated, then asked, And what did you choose? Kalira's jaw tightened. We survived, but at great cost. We became warriors not for conquest, but to protect what was left. That is why we made the pact, to ensure that others would not repeat our mistakes. A test of humanity. Kalira stopped suddenly, turning to face Gavin. Show me your people. What? Gavin asked, startled. You said humanity is worth saving, Kalira said. Prove it. Show me the strength, the resilience, and the compassion you claim exists among your kind. Gavin swallowed hard, knowing the task wouldn't be easy. Most of Earth's population lived in scattered, struggling communities, fighting for survival in a world that offered little mercy. All right, he said. Follow me. They made their way to the outskirts of the city, where a small encampment of survivors had taken root. The camp was a patchwork of makeshift shelters and salvaged technology, surrounded by crude barricades. Children played in the dirt while adults tended to communal gardens and repaired equipment. Kalira watched them silently, her expression unreadable. These are your people? They're what's left, Gavin said. They don't have much, but they share what they can. They've managed to survive, even in the face of everything. Kalira tilted her head, her gaze lingering on a woman tending to an injured child. Survival is instinctual. It does not prove worth. Before Gavin could respond, a shout rang out from the edge of the camp. A group of scavengers had breached the barricades, armed with crude weapons and demanding supplies. The scavenger attack. The camp erupted into chaos as the scavengers advanced, their voices filled with desperation and hostility. Kalira stepped forward, her golden eyes blazing as she assessed the situation. Stay back, Gavin warned. These people are dangerous. Kalira ignored him, drawing a blade from the sheath at her side. The weapon shimmered with an otherworldly light, its edges crackling with energy. I will handle this. Before Gavin could protest, she moved with blinding speed, placing herself between the scavengers and the camp. Her voice rang out like a command from the stars. Leave. Now. The scavengers hesitated, their eyes widening as they took in her towering form and glowing blade. One of them, a grizzled man with a scar across his cheek, stepped forward. And who the hell are you supposed to be? Kalira's blade flared brighter, and the air around her seemed to hum with power. Your only warning. The man growled, raising his weapon. We don't take orders from aliens. Before he could fire, Kalira moved. In a single fluid motion, she disarmed him, her blade slicing through his weapon like paper. The other scavengers scrambled back, fear etched on their faces. Go, Kalira said, her voice cold, or you will face the consequences. The scavengers didn't wait for her to repeat herself. They fled, their shouts fading into the distance. A glimpse of compassion. As the camp slowly returned to normal, the survivors gathered around Kalira, their expressions a mix of awe and fear. A young boy stepped forward, clutching a small, tattered flower. He held it out to her, his hands trembling. Thank you, he said softly. Kalira stared at the boy, her golden eyes softening. Slowly, she knelt and took the flower, her massive frame seeming almost gentle as she accepted the gift. You are brave, she said, her voice quieter than before. Gavin watched the exchange, a flicker of hope stirring in his chest. See? There's good here. There's something worth saving. Kalira rose, her expression thoughtful. Perhaps. The revelation. That night, as the camp settled into an uneasy calm, Gavin and Kalira sat by a small fire. The stars above were dim, obscured by the haze of Earth's polluted atmosphere. You don't trust us, do you? Gavin asked, breaking the silence. Kalira's gaze remained fixed on the fire. Your kind has much to prove, but there is potential. I can see that now. Gavin hesitated, then asked, why were you the one to answer the call? Why not someone else from your people? Kalira's expression darkened. I am an exile. An exile? Gavin repeated, surprised. My people banished me after I failed them, Kalira said, her voice heavy with regret. I was a commander, tasked with protecting a vital colony. I made a choice one I believed was right, but it cost many lives. Gavin frowned. And they sent you here as punishment? Kalira shook her head. No, the summons was random. But perhaps fate brought me here. Before Gavin could respond, a distant rumble shook the ground. The survivors emerged from their shelters, their faces pale with fear. On the horizon, ships descended from the sky, their ominous shapes illuminated by the faint glow of Earth's dying atmosphere. Gavin's stomach sank as he recognized the insignia on the ships. The Dralvek Dominion, Kalira said, her voice grim. They've come. Chapter 3. A Greater Threat. The night sky was ablaze with the harsh glow of descending Dralvek Dominion ships, their silhouettes sharp and predatory. The camp erupted into chaos as the survivors scrambled for safety. Gavin's pulse raced as he watched the invaders' arrival. He turned to Kalira, whose golden eyes burned with intensity. Who are they? He asked, his voice tight with fear. Kalira's gaze never wavered from the horizon. The Dralvek Dominion. Conquerors. They spread across systems like locusts, consuming resources and enslaving populations. Gavin's stomach sank. Why are they here? Kalira's expression darkened. Because of me. Kaliras passed. The survivors gathered in the makeshift shelter of the largest tent, their eyes wide with terror as the sound of the Dralvek ships grew closer. Kalira stood at the center, her imposing figure a stark contrast to the frightened humans around her. "They're after you?" Gavin pressed, his voice low but urgent. Kalira nodded. "I was once a commander of the Zorinthian fleet. The Dralvek were our greatest adversaries. During one campaign, I made a decision to sacrifice a colony to save the fleet. It cost thousands of lives, but it saved millions." Her voice faltered, and for a moment, Gavin saw the weight of her guilt. "My people exiled me for my failure to protect them all. The Dralvek see my exile as a weakness, a loose thread to unravel." "So, they've come for revenge?" Gavin asked. "Not just revenge," Kalira replied, her voice sharp. "They know your world is vulnerable. If they capture me, they will use me as leverage to strike at the Zorinthians, and they will not spare Earth." Preparing for battle, Kalira turned to the survivors, her commanding tone cutting through their fear. "If you want to live, you must fight. The Dralvek will show no mercy." The camp leader, a grizzled man named Elias, stepped forward. "Fight them? With what? We've got tools and scavenged parts. They have ships." "You have me," Kalira said simply, "and I have a plan." She outlined a desperate strategy. Lure the Dralvek forces into the camp's outskirts, where Kalira and Gavin would disable their command ship. Without leadership, the Dominion's forces would descend into chaos, giving the survivors a chance to escape. "It's risky," Gavin said. "If we fail, We won't," Kalira interrupted. "But we must move quickly." The first wave. As dawn broke over the ruins, the Dralvek forces began their advance. Armored soldiers marched in tight formation, their weapons gleaming under the pale sunlight. The survivors watched from their hiding spots, their nerves frayed but their resolve firm. Kalira stood at the forefront, her glowing blade in hand. "Hold until I give the signal," she said, her voice low but steady. The Dralvek soldiers entered the camp, their leader barking commands in a guttural alien tongue. Kalira stepped forward, drawing their attention. "You seek me," she called, her voice carrying over the battlefield. "Come and take me if you dare." The Dralvek commander snarled and gestured for his troops to attack. Kalira moved like lightning, her blade slicing through their ranks with precision. The survivors, emboldened by her example, launched their own assault, using improvised weapons and traps to fight back. Gavin stayed at the edge of the fray, his heart pounding as he watched Kalira tear through the enemy forces. He couldn't help but marvel at her skill and ferocity, even as the odds stacked against them. The command ship. With the bulk of the Dralvek forces occupied, Gavin and Kalira slipped away, making their way toward the towering command ship. Its sleek, black hull loomed over the landscape, bristling with weapons and shields. How do we get inside?" Gavin whispered. Kalira's lips curled into a faint smirk. "We don't knock." She pressed a device to the ship's hull, and a small explosion created an opening. The two slipped inside, navigating the dimly lit corridors with practiced stealth. As they approached the control center, Gavin couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "Are you sure about this?" "No," Kalira admitted. "But hesitation will kill us faster than certainty." The final confrontation. The control center was heavily guarded, with rows of soldiers flanking the central console. At the heart of the room stood the Dralvek commander, a towering figure clad in ornate armor. His glowing red eyes locked onto Kalira the moment she entered. "Kalira of the Zorinthians," he growled, his voice dripping with disdain. "How far you've fallen." Kalira stepped forward, her blade at the ready. "I fell, but I still stand. Can you say the same?" The commander roared and lunged at her, his massive blade cleaving through the air. Kalira met him head-on, their weapons clashing in a shower of sparks. Gavin scrambled to the console, his hands shaking as he tried to override the ship systems. "A little help here," he called. "Do your part." Kalira shouted, her focus never wavering. The battle raged around them, with Kalira holding off the commander and his soldiers while Gavin worked. Finally, the console beeped, and the ship systems began to shut down. "We're in," Gavin shouted. "The ship's disabled." Kalira seized the opportunity, delivering a devastating blow that sent the commander to his knees. She stood over him, her blade poised for the killing strike. "Finish it," he snarled. "End it, warrior." Kalira hesitated, then lowered her blade. "No, killing you would be a mercy." The commander's eyes burned with hatred as Kalira and Gavin fled the control center, the ship's alarms blaring around them. A Pyrrhic victory. The survivors watched in awe as the Dralvek forces retreated, their command ship powerless. Cheers erupted as the invaders fled, but the cost of victory was evident. The camp lay in ruins, and many lives had been lost. Kalira stood among the survivors, her expression somber. "You fought well," she said. "Your people have strength." Gavin approached her, his face streaked with dirt and sweat. "We couldn't have done it without you." Kalira turned to him, her golden eyes softening. "Perhaps, but your people proved themselves today. There is hope for humanity." A new beginning. As the survivors began rebuilding, Kalira prepared to leave. "The Dralvek will return," she said, "but you have shown me that your kind is worth fighting for. I will ensure they think twice before coming back." Gavin stepped forward, his voice filled with determination. "You don't have to do it alone." Kalira's lips curled into a faint smile. "You are bold, human. Perhaps that is your greatest strength." Together, they set their sights on the stars, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Epilogue: The Warrior's Oath. The Iron Dagger, Kalira's sleek and battle-worn starship, loomed in the camp's clearing as survivors gathered to bid farewell to their unexpected savior. The night sky, clearer now after the Dralvek ship's departure, was dotted with stars. The faint hum of repair efforts and murmurs of hope filled the air. Gavin stood at the foot of the dagger's ramp, his arms crossed. "So, what's next for you? Back to wandering the galaxy?" Kalira adjusted the gauntlets on her armor, her golden eyes fixed on the horizon. "The Dralvek Dominion won't let this defeat go unanswered. They'll regroup, and they'll come for me again." "And Earth?" Gavin asked, his voice quieter. Kalira's expression softened slightly. "Earth has proven itself stronger than I expected, but it is still fragile. You have potential, Gavin Holt. Don't waste it." Her words carried weight, but Gavin's mind was racing with possibilities. He couldn't just go back to the lab, pretending nothing had changed. Kalira had shown him the larger galaxy, a universe filled with threats and wonders beyond anything Earth had known. He wasn't ready to let her leave, not yet. "What if I came with you?" Gavin blurted out, surprising even himself. Kalira turned to him, one eyebrow raised. "You? On my ship?" Gavin shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Why not? You've seen I can handle myself under pressure. And you might need someone who understands Earth's quirks if you plan to keep helping us." Kalira studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, to his surprise, she smiled a small, genuine smile that lit up her sharp features. "You are bold, Gavin Holt," she said, "and boldness has its uses. Very well. You may join me for now." A new journey. As Gavin climbed the ramp of the Iron Dagger, he felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. The interior of the ship was a stark contrast to the rough-and-tumble camp below. Its walls were lined with alien technology, glowing softly in hues of blue and silver. The hum of its engines resonated through the floor, a reminder of the power this vessel held. Kalira gestured to a small, empty seat in the cockpit. "Strap in, human. This ship doesn't coddle its passengers." Gavin chuckled, taking the seat and securing himself. "I wouldn't expect it to." As the engines roared to life, the camp below grew smaller and smaller. Survivors waved, their faces lit by the glow of the ship's thrusters. Gavin couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt for leaving them, but he knew this was the right choice. If humanity was going to stand a chance against threats like the Dralvek, it needed allies, and Gavin needed to learn what it would take to become one. The warrior and the human. Hours passed as the Iron Dagger soared through hyperspace. Kalira worked silently at the controls, her focus unwavering. Gavin, meanwhile, struggled to suppress the dozens of questions swirling in his mind. Finally, Kalira broke the silence. "You're awfully quiet, human. That's unlike you." Gavin grinned sheepishly, just trying to take it all in. "This isn't exactly how I expected my week to go." Kalira glanced at him, her lips twitching in amusement. Adaptation is key to survival. You'll learn. What about you? Gavin asked. What's it like being in exile? Wandering the galaxy with no home to go back to? Kalira's expression darkened, but she didn't look away. It is lonely, but it is my penance. I carry the weight of my failure, and I fight so others will not suffer as my people did. Gavin hesitated, then said softly, You're not alone anymore. Kalira's gaze lingered on him for a moment before she returned her attention to the controls. No, she said quietly. I suppose I'm not. A warning from the stars. As they approached the edge of Zorinthian space, the ship's comm system crackled to life. A holographic display appeared, projecting the image of a Zorinthian warrior clad in ceremonial armor. His face was stern, his golden eyes sharp. Kalira, the warrior said, his voice filled with authority. You've drawn the Dralvek too close to our borders. Explain yourself. Kalira stood tall, her tone steady. Commander Zareth, I was summoned by an ancient oath. The Dralvek pursued me to protect this human world. Zaretha's gaze shifted to Gavin, his expression unreadable. A human? You risk the safety of the Zorinthian order for one of them? He is more than he appears, Kalira replied. And humanity may yet prove an ally in the fight against the Dominion. Zareth studied Gavin for a long moment before nodding. Very well. But tread carefully, Kalira. Your exile does not grant you immunity from our laws. And if this human brings ruin upon us, he won't, Kalira said firmly. You have my word. The hologram faded, leaving the cockpit in silence. Gavin shifted uncomfortably. Well, that was intense. Kalira smirked faintly. You'll get used to it. A universe of possibilities. As the iron dagger ventured deeper into the stars, Gavin felt a growing sense of purpose. The universe was vast and filled with dangers, but it was also filled with opportunities, chances to prove humanity's worth, to make allies, and to fight for something greater than himself. Beside him, Kalira remained a stoic and formidable presence, but Gavin sensed that her walls were beginning to crack. Beneath her warrior exterior was someone who had suffered loss, carried guilt, and yearned for redemption. Together, they formed an unlikely pair. The human scientist and the alien warrior, bound by fate and a shared determination to protect what mattered most. The stars stretched endlessly before them, and their journey was just beginning.